Wyoming Territory, 1870. The bitter wind howled across the snow-dusted plains of the Powder River Basin, matching the emptiness that echoed inside Ryder Zanetti's hollow chest. At 26, he stood alone beside a fresh grave, his lean frame rigid against the winter's bite, a solitary figure beneath the vast Wyoming sky. The simple wooden marker bore a name that had, until 2 weeks prior, been the center of his world. Sarah Zanetti, beloved wife, 1848-1870. The young widow adjusted his worn leather gloves, his clean-shaven face weathered beyond his years. Beneath his dark cowboy hat, blue eyes that once sparkled with laughter now reflected only vacant pain. The small homestead he'd built with Sarah looked empty, their dreams of children and prosperity buried alongside her body, taken by the fever that had swept through the region without mercy. "No man belongs out here with his heart exposed," he muttered, a cloud of breath forming in the cold air. The frontier had taught Ryder a brutal lesson: love was a luxury the West demanded in sacrifice. Better to wall yourself off, to focus on survival alone. Vulnerability was just another way to die out here. He turned from the grave toward the humble cabin, where inside waited only silence and memories. What he wanted now was simple: to keep the small cattle operation running, to honor Sarah's memory by making the land yield what it had promised them both. What he needed, though he would deny it fiercely, was something to fill the void that threatened to consume him whole. Ryder believed firmly that the frontier was no place for tender emotions. Love had found him once, and its loss had nearly destroyed him. He wouldn't make that mistake again. 3 weeks later, the spring thaw was beginning to soften the land when gunshots echoed through the valley. Ryder's head snapped up from where he'd been mending fence, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. The sounds came again, 3 rapid shots, then silence. Against the ingrained caution that had kept him alive for years, Ryder mounted his chestnut gelding and rode toward the disturbance. Topping a ridge, he pulled up short at the scene below. 2 bodies lay motionless on the ground. A young Apache woman fought desperately against 3 men who were attempting to bind her wrists. Her captors wore no uniforms but had the hard, predatory look of men who hunted people for bounty or worse. "Wildcats got spirit, the captain will pay extra," one man laughed, dodging a well-aimed kick. Ryder knew he should turn away. The conflicts between settlers, military, and the Apache were not his concern. The West was full of such violence, and interfering would only bring trouble to his door. Yet something in the woman's defiant struggle stirred something he thought had died with Sarah, a basic human impulse to protect. Without fully comprehending his own actions, Ryder drew his revolver and fired a warning shot into the air. "That's enough," he called, his voice carrying across the distance with quiet authority. "Let her go." The men froze, looking up in surprise. Their leader, a scar-faced man with a dirty beard, squinted against the sun. "This ain't your business, cowboy. This Apache bitch and her people raided a settlement north of here. We're taking her to Fort Laramie." The woman's dark eyes locked with Ryder's across the distance, and in them he saw not the savage the men described, but raw human fear mingled with fierce dignity. Her long black hair was partially loose from its braids, and despite the dirt and struggle, he could see she was young, perhaps 20, and striking in her beauty. "I don't see any badges on you men," Ryder replied evenly. "And those 2 on the ground look like Apache men to me, not soldiers." "Her brothers," the leader spat. "They resisted, now clear out before you join them." Ryder's mind raced. He was outnumbered, though he'd positioned himself with the high ground advantage. Getting involved went against every instinct for self-preservation he'd cultivated. Yet the thought of riding away, of abandoning the woman to whatever fate awaited her, sat like poison in his gut. "I'll give you one chance to leave," Ryder said, his thumb clicking back the hammer. "Without her." What followed was a blur of violence. The leader drew first, but Ryder had anticipated it, sending a bullet through the man's shoulder. The other 2 scattered for cover, returning fire as the woman dove behind a boulder. A bullet grazed Ryder's arm, burning like fire, but his next 2 shots found their marks, one man down with a leg wound, the other retreating toward their horses. "This ain't over," the leader shouted, clutching his bleeding shoulder as he stumbled away. When the dust settled, Ryder approached cautiously, keeping his revolver ready. The woman emerged from behind the rock, her expression wary but defiant. Up close her beauty was even more evident: high cheekbones, intelligent eyes the color of obsidian, and a graceful strength in her movements despite her ordeal. "You all right?" he asked awkwardly. She studied him with understandable suspicion before replying in clear, if accented, English. "Why did you help me?" Ryder had no good answer. "Those weren't lawmen," he said finally. "And 3 against 1 didn't seem sporting." A faint smile touched her lips. "I am Mianna Nahel," she said, "and these were my brothers." Her voice remained steady, though her eyes betrayed her grief as she gestured toward the still forms. "Ryder Zanetti," he replied, then added, "I'm sorry about your brothers." Her shoulders straightened. "I must bury them properly, then I must reach my people." She looked at him directly. "The men will return with others. You should not have involved yourself." "Probably not," Ryder agreed, "but it's done now." He knew he should leave her to her task and return to his homestead, to the safety of isolation. Yet the thought of her alone, pursued by men who would return with reinforcements, prevented him from mounting his horse. With a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest, Ryder made another decision that defied his newfound belief in emotional distance. "I'll help you bury your brothers," he said. "And then, if you want, I can take you to my place until it's safe for you to find your people." Mianna's gaze was penetrating, as if she could see through to his very core. "Why would you risk more?" Ryder looked away, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Just seems like the decent thing to do." What he couldn't articulate was how helping her had made him feel something besides grief for the first time in months. How action, even dangerous action, was preferable to the emptiness of his cabin and the ghosts that haunted it. Together, they buried her brothers with stones to mark their graves. Neither spoke much during the solemn task. When it was done, Mianna performed a brief ceremony, singing softly in her native language, her voice carrying hauntingly across the open land. Ryder watched, transfixed by her dignity and grief, feeling an unwelcome kinship in their shared understanding of loss. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they mounted their horses, Mianna on one of her brother's ponies, and rode toward Ryder's homestead, both aware they were beginning something neither had anticipated when the day began. The first days of their uneasy alliance were filled with tension and cautious distance. Ryder insisted Mianna take the bed in the cabin while he slept in the stable with the horses. She moved through his home like a ghost, watchful and wary, while he buried himself in the daily labor of the ranch, finding comfort in physical exhaustion. On the third evening, as Ryder returned from checking his small herd, he found Mianna standing at the stove, the aroma of cooking food filling the cabin that had known only cold meals since Sarah's passing. "You did not have much," she said without turning, "but I made stew." Ryder stood awkwardly in the doorway, struck by the simple domesticity of the scene and the complicated emotions it stirred. "Thank you," he managed. They ate in silence, but it was a different quality of silence than before, less strained, more companionable. After the meal, Mianna spoke. "Your wife," she said, nodding toward the small portrait of Sarah that sat on the mantel. "When did she die?" Ryder stiffened. "Month ago, fever." Mianna nodded. "My husband died 2 winters ago, soldiers." Her directness was startling, but somehow easier to bear than the pitying glances of his neighbors. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. "Life continues," she replied with simple pragmatism that matched his own frontier philosophy. Then she added, "until it does not." That night, for the first time since Sarah's death, Ryder dreamed of something other than loss. He dreamed of open plains and running horses and woke feeling strangely lighter. As days stretched into a week, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mianna proved skilled with horses and knowledgeable about local plants. She mended clothing and prepared meals, while Ryder tended the cattle and repaired winter damage to the homestead. They spoke little of personal matters but began to talk of practical things: the weather, the animals, the land. "Why do you stay here alone?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills. Ryder took a long time to answer. "It was our dream, Sarah's and mine, to build something out here. Seems wrong to abandon it." "Dreams can change," Mianna said softly, "like rivers change course." Her words unsettled him, challenging the rigid path he'd set for himself after Sarah's death. The truth he wasn't ready to face was that the ranch had become less a dream and more a monument to grief, a self-imposed isolation that matched his belief that the frontier was too harsh for tenderness. The next day brought trouble. Ryder spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching. Through his spyglass, he recognized the scarred leader from the confrontation. "They've found us," he told Mianna tersely. "6 men at least." Her expression remained calm, though her eyes flashed with determination. "I can fight." "We're outnumbered," Ryder said, already checking his rifle and revolver. "You should hide in the root cellar. If things go badly, there's a tunnel that leads to the creek bed." Mianna shook her head firmly. "I will not hide while you die for me." There was no time to argue. They hastily prepared what defenses they could, barricading windows, positioning weapons, creating lines of fire that would force their attackers into the open. As the riders approached, Ryder felt an unexpected calm. For weeks after Sarah's death, he'd moved through life numb and disconnected, almost welcoming the idea that some mishap might end his pain. Now, with danger imminent, he found himself fiercely present, determined to survive. The attack came just before dusk. The men split up, attempting to surround the cabin. Ryder's first shot dropped a man trying to reach the stable. Mianna proved herself deadly accurate with a rifle, winging another attacker. For nearly an hour, they held their position as bullets splintered wood around them. "We can rush them after dark," the scarred leader shouted. "Burn them out if we have to." As night fell, Ryder knew their position would soon become untenable. "We need to leave," he whispered to Mianna. "There's horses saddled in the back of the stable if we can reach them." A crash from the rear of the cabin interrupted him. Someone had broken through. Ryder spun, firing twice at the shadowy figure that lunged through the door. The man fell, but not before his own shot caught Ryder in the side, the impact driving him to his knees. Mianna was beside him instantly, her hands pressing against the wound. "Can you stand?" she asked urgently. Gritting his teeth against the searing pain, Ryder nodded. Together they made their way through the tunnel to the creek bed, the sounds of the attackers discovering their escape fading behind them. By some miracle they reached the horses. What followed was a night of desperate flight. Ryder fought to stay conscious, each hoofbeat sending waves of agony through his wounded side. Mianna led them unerringly through the darkness, following game trails and water courses that left no tracks. Near dawn, they reached a secluded canyon where a small Apache camp was hidden among the rocks. Ryder remembered little of their arrival, only hands helping him from his horse, voices speaking rapidly in a language he didn't understand, and Mianna's face, fierce and determined, the last thing he saw before blackness claimed him. Ryder drifted in and out of consciousness for what seemed like days. When lucidity finally returned fully, he found himself lying in a small wickiup, the wound in his side expertly bandaged. Mianna sat nearby, grinding herbs in a stone mortar. "You are awake," she observed, setting aside her work. "Good, I was beginning to think you preferred dreams to living." "Where are we?" Ryder asked, his voice rough from disuse. "With my mother's family, a hunting camp." She helped him drink from a water skin. "You have been sleeping for 3 days." Ryder tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "The men who attacked us. They did not follow. My cousin Standing Elk thinks they feared coming too deep into Apache territory." She applied a poultice to his wound with gentle hands. "You fought well for a white man." There was a hint of teasing in her voice that surprised him. "You weren't so bad yourself for anyone." Her smile was quick but genuine, transforming her face. Ryder felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with his fever. Over the following days, as strength gradually returned to his body, Ryder observed the small Apache camp with growing curiosity. There were only about 20 people, mostly women, children, and elders. They were not hostile toward him, but regarded him with cautious distance, with the exception of Mianna's grandmother, a tiny, wizened woman who seemed to find his presence endlessly amusing. "Why are they separated from the main tribe?" he asked Mianna one evening as she changed his bandages. She was silent for a moment. "Many of our people have been forced onto reservations. Others fight with warriors like Geronimo. This family chooses a middle path, staying free but avoiding conflict when possible." Her hands stilled on his side. "It becomes more difficult each year. The white man's hunger for land never ends." The simple truth of her words made Ryder uncomfortable. He had been part of that hunger-claiming land that had once belonged to her people. "And you," he asked, "what path do you choose?" Mianna's dark eyes met his. "I choose to survive. Since my husband died, that has been enough." She secured the bandage with practiced efficiency. "What do you choose, Ryder Zanetti, besides your grief?" Her direct question pierced through his defenses. "I don't know any more," he admitted. "I thought I knew what my life would be. Now," he shrugged, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "Now you must find a new path," she said simply. As Ryder recovered, he began helping around the camp, first with small tasks he could manage from a seated position, then gradually with more physical work. The Apache were master horsemen, and despite his wound, he could still gentle the wild mustangs they captured. This skill earned him a measure of respect, particularly from the younger boys who watched his techniques with rapt attention. Mianna acted as his interpreter and guide to Apache customs, explaining the meanings behind their ceremonies and traditions. In the evenings, around the small cooking fires, he found himself included in their circle, listening to stories told in a mixture of Apache and English. "Your grandmother keeps laughing at me," Ryder commented one night as the elderly woman chuckled in his direction yet again. Mianna smiled. "She says your spirit is like a young horse, strong but confused about which direction to run." "And what do you say?" he asked, suddenly needing to know how she saw him. Mianna considered him thoughtfully, the firelight casting warm shadows across her face. At 22, she had already endured more than many twice her age, yet retained a quiet strength that Ryder found increasingly compelling. "I say you are a man standing at a crossroads, afraid to choose a path because all paths contain pain," she replied finally. Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. Since Sarah's death, Ryder had been existing, not living, going through motions without purpose or connection. Here, among people who should have been strangers to him, he found himself awakening to life again. One afternoon, while they were collecting medicinal plants on a hillside overlooking the camp, Mianna suddenly tensed, her hand gripping Ryder's arm. "Soldiers," she whispered, pointing to dust on the distant plain. They watched as a cavalry patrol passed several miles away, a reminder of the precarious position of Mianna's people. That night the camp was quiet, the mood subdued. "They cannot stay here much longer," Mianna explained. "Soon they must move farther into the mountains or risk discovery." "And you," Ryder asked, "will you go with them?" The question hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to address directly. "I do not know," she admitted. "My path is unclear." 3 weeks after their arrival at the Apache camp, Ryder's wound had healed enough that he could ride without reopening it. The decision to return to his homestead loomed over him like a storm cloud. "I should see what's left," he told Mianna as they sat beside a small stream, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "Rebuild if I can." "Yes," she agreed, her expression carefully neutral. "A man should have a home." Ryder studied her profile, struck by how essential her presence had become to him. In the midst of danger and recovery, something unexpected had grown between them, a connection that transcended their different worlds. "You could come with me," he said, the words emerging before he could consider their full meaning. "Just to see if it's safe," he added hastily. Mianna turned to face him fully, her dark eyes searching his. "Is that what you want, for me to see if it is safe?" Ryder took a deep breath, forcing himself to confront the feelings he'd been avoiding. "No," he said honestly, "I want you to come because I don't want to be there without you." The admission cost him, breaking through the walls he'd built around his heart since Sarah's death. His belief that the frontier was no place for vulnerability, that emotional attachments were dangerous liabilities, wavered in the face of the simple truth that Mianna's presence made him feel alive again. "My people would say it is too soon after your wife's passing," she said softly, "that her spirit may become jealous." "And what do you say?" Ryder asked. "I say life on the frontier is too short and too hard to refuse connection when it is offered." She reached out, her fingers lightly touching his. "But I cannot be a replacement for what you lost. I must be myself, Apache and all." "I wouldn't want you any other way," Ryder replied, his voice rough with emotion. The next morning they prepared to leave, Ryder now well enough to make the journey back to his homestead. Mianna's grandmother approached as they saddled their horses, speaking rapidly in Apache. Mianna listened, then translated. She says you have a good heart beneath your white man's confusion, Mianna told him with a hint of amusement. And that I should teach you to see with both eyes, not just the white eye. Ryder bowed respectfully to the old woman. Tell her I'm willing to learn. The journey back took 2 days, during which they spoke of practical matters, what they might find at the homestead, whether the men who attacked them might return, how Ryder's cattle had likely scattered. Beneath these conversations ran a current of anticipation and uncertainty about what future they might build together. As they crested the final ridge overlooking Ryder's property, they reined in their horses, shocked by the sight below. The cabin still stood, but the stable had been burned. Several of Ryder's cattle grazed nearby, apparently having returned to familiar ground. Could be worse, Ryder muttered, surveying the damage. At least they didn't burn at all. They approached cautiously, weapons ready, but found no signs of recent human presence. Inside the cabin, furniture had been overturned and items stolen, but the structure remained sound. Sarah's portrait lay smashed on the floor, the image torn, a deliberate act of desecration that made Ryder's jaw clench in anger. Mianna placed a gentle hand on his arm. Objects are not memories, she said softly. What you carry in your heart cannot be destroyed by such men. Her wisdom calmed him. Together they began the process of restoring order to the chaos, righting furniture, sweeping broken glass, assessing what remained and what was needed. As dusk approached, Ryder built a fire in the hearth while Mianna prepared a simple meal from the supplies they'd brought. The domesticity of the scene struck him forcefully, how natural it felt to share this space with her, how the cabin seemed less haunted by Sarah's absence. We should repair the stable first, Mianna said as they ate, before building a proper corral for the horses. Her casual use of we and the assumption of a shared future both surprised and pleased him. You're planning to stay then? He asked. Mianna met his gaze steadily. If you wish it. I do, Ryder replied simply, but your people. My grandmother says I must follow my heart. She set down her plate. My husband was a good man. When he died, I thought perhaps that part of my life was finished, that I would live only for survival. Her voice softened. But you have awakened something I thought was dead. Ryder understood exactly what she meant. Moving slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. I never expected to feel this way again, he admitted, after Sarah. I convinced myself that caring for someone was a weakness I couldn't afford out here. And now, Mianna asked, her fingers intertwining with his, now I think maybe it's the only strength that matters. That night they slept separately, Ryder on a bedroll near the hearth, Mianna on the bed. But something fundamental had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities neither had anticipated when they first met. The following weeks brought hard work and gradual healing. They rebuilt the stable, rounded up the scattered cattle, and replanted the small garden Sarah had started. Word spread that Ryder had returned, and occasionally neighbors stopped by, their curious glances at Mianna barely disguised. Most were civil enough, though some made their disapproval clear through cold shoulders and clipped conversations. Ryder found he cared less than he might have expected. The frontier had always attracted those seeking to escape society's rigid expectations, and he had never much concerned himself with others' opinions. Mianna handled these interactions with dignified grace, neither hiding her Apache heritage nor flaunting it. Her intelligence and capability spoke for themselves, and at least a few of the neighboring women came to appreciate her knowledge of healing plants and horse medicine. As summer bloomed across the Wyoming landscape, Ryder and Mianna's relationship deepened. Their first kiss came naturally, as they stood together watching a sunset that painted the western sky in brilliant orange and purple. Their first night together followed soon after, a joining that felt both new and somehow inevitable, tender and passionate in equal measure. I never thought I would find this again, Ryder whispered in the darkness, holding Mianna close against him. A reason to look forward to tomorrow. But shadows still lurked at the edges of their newfound happiness. Rumors reached them of increased military activity against the Apache bands still fighting for freedom. Mianna worried for her family in the hunting camp, though occasional messengers brought word that they had moved deeper into the mountains for safety. Then one afternoon, as Ryder returned from checking fence lines, he found a military patrol in his yard, a lieutenant and 6 soldiers, their horses dusty from the trail. "Mr. Zanetti," the lieutenant called as Ryder approached cautiously. "Lieutenant James Preston, Fort Laramie." "What can I do for you, Lieutenant?" Ryder asked, keenly aware of Mianna watching from the cabin door. "We're tracking a band of Apache renegades," Preston said. "Had reports they might be in this area." His eyes flicked to Mianna. "I see you've got yourself an Indian woman." Ryder straightened, his hand instinctively moving closer to his sidearm. "My wife," he said clearly. The lieutenant raised an eyebrow. "Married are you, by who?" "By our own words to each other," Ryder replied evenly. "Good enough out here." Preston nodded slowly. "Well, regardless. If you see any sign of hostiles, it's your duty to report it. These renegades have been raiding settlements north of here." "Haven't seen any raiders," Ryder said truthfully. "Just trying to run my ranch in peace." After the soldiers departed, Mianna emerged from the cabin, her expression troubled. "They will return," she said with certainty. "That one, the lieutenant, he did not believe you." Ryder knew she was right. The frontier was closing, the wild spaces shrinking as civilization pushed westward. Their precarious happiness existed in a narrowing window between worlds. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Mianna spoke of her fears. "My people are being destroyed, Ryder, not just killed, though there is much death, but our way of life is disappearing. Soon there will be only reservations or graves." Ryder held her tighter, wishing he could deny her words but knowing they contained truth. "What can we do?" She was silent for a long moment. "I do not know. But I cannot abandon my family if they are in danger." "I wouldn't ask you to," Ryder assured her. "If need be, we'll find them, help them." The next morning brought a messenger, a young Apache boy who appeared silently at their door at dawn. He spoke rapidly to Mianna in their language, his expression urgent. "What is it?" Ryder asked as the boy gulped down the water Mianna offered him. "Soldiers attacked the hunting camp 3 days ago," she translated, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Most escaped into the high country, but they took some prisoner, including my grandmother." Ryder felt his heart sink. Where were they taken? "Fort Laramie, he thinks." Mianna's eyes met his, fear and determination mingling in their depths. "Ryder, I must go to her. She is old, she will not survive long in their prison." The request was unnecessary. Ryder was already calculating distances, options. "We'll leave at dusk," he said, "less chance of being seen." That afternoon they prepared with grim efficiency, packing supplies, readying weapons, planning their approach to the fort. Ryder knew what they were contemplating was dangerous, possibly suicidal. Interfering with military prisoners could see him hanged as a traitor, Mianna shot on sight. Yet the thought of not acting, of abandoning Mianna's grandmother to a lonely death in captivity, was unthinkable. The frontier had taught Ryder harsh lessons about survival, but Mianna had shown him that survival alone was not enough. Some principles were worth the risk. As they prepared to leave, Ryder took a moment to stand at Sarah's grave, the first time he had visited it since returning to the homestead. "I think you would understand," he said softly to the wooden marker. "You always saw clearer than me what mattered most." Mianna joined him, respectfully keeping a small distance. When Ryder extended his hand, she stepped forward and took it, standing beside him in silent support. "She would have liked you," Ryder said. "You're both stronger than me." Mianna shook her head. "Different strengths. She gave you love when you needed it. Now you give me strength when I need it." As dusk fell, they mounted their horses and rode eastward toward Fort Laramie, leaving the homestead behind without knowing if they would ever return. Fort Laramie loomed against the night sky, its walls illuminated by perimeter torches. Ryder and Mianna observed from a distant ridge, considering their approach. "The stockade will be here," Ryder said, sketching a rough map in the dirt. "Based on what your cousin told us, that's where they're holding the prisoners." Mianna nodded, her face set with determination. "How do we get in?" "I go in openly," Ryder replied. "I'll say I have information about Apache movements to report. Once inside, I'll create a distraction while you slip in from the south wall where the shadows are deepest." It was a desperate plan with countless ways to fail, but neither could devise a better alternative. They waited until the midnight hour when the watch would be at its most drowsy. then separated, Ryder heading directly for the main gate while Mianna circled around to the southern approach. "Be careful," she whispered before they parted, touching his face briefly. "You too," he replied, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. The guard at the gate was suspicious of Ryder's late arrival but eventually summoned the lieutenant from earlier that day. Preston emerged from his quarters looking irritable at being disturbed. "Zanetti, what are you doing here at this hour?" "Rode hard to get here," Ryder explained, affecting anxiety. "Apache raiding party passed near my place heading east. Thought you should know right away." Preston's interest sharpened. "How many, armed?" "Dozen, maybe more," Ryder lied. "Heavily armed, they didn't see me, I was up in the high pasture when they passed through the valley." "Show me on the map," Preston ordered, leading Ryder toward the command building. Inside, Ryder spun a convincing tale, pointing to locations on the map that would send any pursuit far from the actual location of Mianna's family. As he spoke, he covertly assessed the fort's layout, noting guard positions and pathways. "I'll need to assemble a patrol," Preston decided. "Johnson, sound the call." As soldiers began assembling in the yard, Ryder seized his opportunity. During the commotion, he knocked over a lantern, sending flames racing across a stack of papers on Preston's desk. "Fire!" Ryder shouted, helping to beat at the flames, deliberately making the situation worse while appearing to help. In the chaos that followed, he slipped away, making his way toward the stockade where Apache prisoners were held. He found Mianna already there, working to pick the primitive lock on the wooden door. "Hurry," he whispered. "The distraction won't last long." The lock gave way, and they entered to find about a dozen Apache prisoners, mainly women and elderly men, huddled in the filthy space. Among them was Mianna's grandmother, her tiny form curled on a thin blanket. "Grandmother," Mianna breathed, rushing to the old woman's side. The reunion was brief but emotional. The elderly woman clutched Mianna's hands, speaking rapidly in their language. Though weak, she could walk with assistance. "We need to move now," Ryder urged. "Can the others travel?" Mianna conferred quickly with the prisoners. "All but one," she reported. "That man is too badly beaten." The injured man spoke to Mianna, gesturing for them to go without him. With heavy hearts, they helped the others to their feet and slipped out of the stockade into the darkness, the confusion from the fire still providing cover. They had almost reached the south wall when a shout went up. "Prisoners escaping, to arms." "Run," Ryder commanded, drawing his revolver and turning to provide covering fire as the Apache fled toward the gap in the wall where they had entered. Bullets whined past as soldiers rushed to intercept them. Ryder fired steadily, aiming to disable rather than kill whenever possible. He saw Mianna helping her grandmother through the opening, then the other prisoners following. A searing pain tore through his thigh as a bullet found its mark, driving him to one knee. Despite the agony, he continued firing until his revolver clicked empty. Dragging himself toward the wall, he saw Mianna's face appear in the opening. "Go," he shouted, "get them to safety." Instead, she crawled through toward him, bullets splintering the wood around her. "Together or not at all," she said fiercely, dragging his arm across her shoulders. With strength born of desperation, they made it through the gap as soldiers converged on their position. Outside, the freed prisoners waited with horses they had gathered from the fort's corral. What followed was a desperate flight through the darkness, Ryder clinging to consciousness as blood soaked his pant leg. They rode north initially, then doubled back to the west, using every trick Mianna knew to confuse their trail. By dawn, they had reached a series of rocky canyons where tracking would be nearly impossible. "We need to stop," Mianna insisted, noting Ryder's pallor. "You cannot ride farther like this." They made camp in a hidden ravine, where Mianna treated Ryder's wound with expert hands. The bullet had passed through cleanly, but he had lost considerable blood. Fever set in by midday, leaving him delirious and weak. Through the haze of pain and confusion, Ryder was aware of Mianna's constant presence, her cool hands on his forehead, her voice murmuring encouragement, her unwavering determination that he would survive. "You must live," she told him during a moment of lucidity. "I did not find you only to lose you." Her words gave him strength, anchoring him to life when it would have been easier to let go. For 3 days they remained hidden while Mianna's people kept watch for pursuit. By the 4th day, Ryder's fever had broken and he could sit up, though standing remained beyond his strength. The soldiers? He asked weakly. Gone east, Mianna reported. My cousin Standing Elk says they follow a false trail toward Nebraska. Ryder nodded, relieved. Your grandmother. Recovering like you, Mianna smiled. She says you have proven yourself a true man, not just a white man playing at bravery. Coming from the stoic elder, this was high praise indeed. Ryder felt an unexpected surge of pride, followed by the sobering realization that their actions had irrevocably altered their situation. He was now a wanted man, a traitor in the eyes of the U.S. government for helping Apache prisoners escape. We can't go back to the homestead, he said, stating what they both knew. They'll look for us there. Mianna nodded, her expression calm. My grandmother says we should go west to the high mountains. There are places there where even the army does not go. And your people? Some will come with us, others will find their own paths. She took his hand. The old ways are ending, Ryder. But we can find a new way together. In that moment, Ryder understood that his transformation was complete. His belief that the frontier demanded emotional isolation as the price of survival had been utterly disproven by the woman before him. It was connection, not isolation, that had given him the strength to risk everything. It was love, not detachment, that made the harsh realities of the West bearable. As strength returned to his body, they began planning their journey westward. Mianna's family would travel with them to the Bighorn Mountains, where they knew of valleys remote enough to establish a new camp. There, perhaps, they could create something unique, a place that honored Apache traditions while forging a path forward in a changing world. 2 weeks after their escape from Fort Laramie, they were ready to depart. Ryder could now ride without reopening his wound, though he still carried a pronounced limp that Mianna warned might never fully heal. On their final night in the canyon camp, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Ryder asked Mianna to be his wife, not just in the private declaration they had already made to each other, but in a ceremony that would join their different worlds. My people have a way, Mianna explained, and I would be honored to follow it with you. The next morning, before the entire group, they stood together as Mianna's grandmother conducted a simple but profound ceremony. They exchanged vows in both English and Apache, promising to walk the same path through whatever challenges lay ahead. As was Apache tradition, they fed each other, symbolizing their commitment to provide for one another. When it was done, the elder pronounced them united in the eyes of the Creator and all present. The small gathering celebrated with singing and a modest feast, honoring both the union and their collective survival. That night, as they lay together beneath firs in their small wickiup, Ryder held Mianna close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A few months ago I thought my life was over, he murmured against her hair, that there was nothing left but enduring until death. Mianna raised herself on one elbow to look into his eyes. And now I understand what Sarah would have wanted for me, not to build a shrine to her memory but to live fully, to risk loving again. He traced the contours of Mianna's face with gentle fingers. You taught me that the frontier doesn't demand we surrender our hearts, only that we find the strength to keep them open despite the hardship. 2 hearts are stronger than one alone, she replied softly. This is what my people have always known. 10 years later, the small settlement in the hidden valley had grown into a thriving community. Ryder and Mianna's log house stood at its center, surrounded by a collection of traditional Apache dwellings and cabins built in the white man's style, reflecting the blended nature of their community. Children played in the central clearing, some full-blooded Apache, others mixed, all growing up with knowledge of both worlds. Among them were Ryder and Mianna's 2 sons and daughter, who moved easily between cultures, speaking both English and Apache with native fluency. The world beyond their valley continued to change. The Indian Wars had largely ended, with most tribes confined to reservations. But here, in this remote sanctuary, they had created something unique, not quite white settlement, not purely Apache camp, but a place where different traditions were respected and preserved. Ryder, now 36, his face weathered by the elements but his eyes clear and peaceful, sat on the porch of their home, watching as Mianna instructed their daughter in the use of medicinal plants. At 32, Mianna remained striking, her black hair now containing a few strands of silver, her movements still graceful and assured. Their eldest son, 8-year-old Thomas, named after Ryder's father, approached with a wooden horse he had carved himself. "Look, father," he said proudly, placing the toy in Ryder's hands. "Fine work," Ryder approved, examining the detailed carving. "Your grandfather would have been impressed." "Which one?" Thomas asked. "Apache grandfather or white grandfather?" "Both," Ryder replied with a smile. "Different skills, same pride." As Thomas ran off to show his siblings, Mianna joined Ryder on the porch, settling beside him on the bench. "He grows more like you every day," she observed. "Poor child," Ryder teased, taking her hand in his. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the life they had built together unfold before them. Occasionally, traders or trappers found their way to the valley, bringing news and supplies from the outside world. Through these visitors, they learned that Ryder's name had eventually faded from wanted posters, the incident at Fort Laramie relegated to the past as more pressing concerns occupied the military. "Do you ever regret it?" Mianna asked suddenly, "leaving your homestead, becoming an outlaw for a time?" Ryder considered the question seriously, as was his way. "No," he said finally, "that place was a monument to what I had lost. This," he gestured to the valley and the community they had created, "this is a testament to what we found together." Mianna leaned against his shoulder, her hand still clasped in his. "The white man's world will find even this place eventually," she said, voicing a concern they both carried. "Probably," Ryder agreed, "but by then our children will know how to navigate both worlds. They'll carry forward what matters most from each." As the sun began to set behind the mountains that sheltered their valley, painting the sky in brilliant golds and purples, Ryder reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the desperate grief of widowhood to the unexpected joy of new love, from his belief in emotional isolation to the discovery that connection was the true strength needed to survive the frontier. "I was wrong, you know," he said softly, "about what the West demands of us." "How so?" Mianna asked. "I thought it required us to harden our hearts, to shut away vulnerability as a weakness." He smiled, watching their children playing in the last light of day. "But the frontier doesn't make a heart grow hard, it reveals what was always there. Some hearts break, some grow stronger through breaking." Mianna nodded, understanding. "Like mine." "Like yours." "Like ours," Ryder corrected, kissing her gently as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Together they had found a truth that transcended the harsh realities of the frontier. That even in the wildest places, perhaps especially there, the human heart's capacity for love and renewal remained the most enduring strength of all.